I trained while everyone slept. Not because I wanted to be different, not because I needed to prove anything, but because the silence was honest. At night, there's no applause, no cameras, no opinions. Just you and the work you've been avoiding all day. People think greatness is loud. They think it announces itself. They think you wake up one morning and suddenly become who they admire. That's not how it happens. Most of it happens when nobody is watching, when the lights are off, when excuses feel reasonable. That's when the real decision shows up. I wasn't born disciplined. I wasn't immune to comfort. I just learned something early on. If I slept when everyone else slept, I would live the same life they lived. And I couldn't accept that. So while the city was quiet, while phones stopped buzzing, while the world agreed it was time to rest, I was already moving. Not fast, not dramatic, just consistent. Because consistency doesn't need witnesses, it only needs commitment, and commitment is lonely. Discipline sounds impressive when people talk about it. They imagine motivation, fire, energy. But real discipline is quieter than that. It's doing the same thing on the days you feel empty, on the days nothing feels urgent, on the days no one would blame you for stopping. That's when it counts. There were nights my body wanted rest, and my mind offered excuses. You did enough today. You can go harder tomorrow. No one will know. And that was the problem. No one would know. That's when discipline becomes isolation. Because no one is there to push you. No one is there to notice if you quit early. It's just you deciding what kind of standard you're willing to live with. People see the results and call it obsession. They say I took it too far, that I sacrificed too much. Maybe they're right. But what they don't see is how ordinary it felt in the moment. It wasn't heroic. It wasn't dramatic. It was repetitive, boring, relentless, and slowly. That repetition started changing things. Not the world, not other people. It changed me. While others rested, I learned how to stay present in discomfort. While others waited for motivation, I learned how to move without it. And over time, that separation grew. Not because I wanted distance, but because discipline creates it. You stop needing company. You stop needing approval. And eventually, you stop being understood. That's the part no one talks about. When you separate yourself long enough, people start to fill in the gaps. They decide who you are without asking. They call it intensity. They call it ego. They call it obsession. Labels are easier than understanding. I heard the whispers, felt the distance. Not all at once. Slowly. Conversations changed. Support became conditional. Belief turned into evaluation. And the moment results slowed, so did the loyalty. That's when doubt creeps in. Not from the outside, from within. You start asking yourself questions you never had time to ask before. Am I doing too much? Am I asking too much? Is this standard unrealistic? Or am I just alone in it? The hardest part wasn't the criticism. Criticism still means someone is paying attention. The hardest part was being reduced. Reduced to a version of myself that fit into someone else's comfort. They didn't see the hours. They didn't feel the weight. They didn't carry the responsibility. They only saw the outcome and decided that was the whole story. So I stopped explaining. Not because I didn't care, but because explanation rarely brings clarity to people who already made up their minds. Silence became easier than defending a standard they never intended to live by. And in that silence, something shifted. I realized that being misunderstood wasn't a phase. It was the cost. There's a moment when quitting stops feeling dramatic and starts feeling reasonable, not because you're weak, but because you're tired. Tired of explaining, tired of being questioned, tired of carrying expectations no one else volunteered to hold. That's when leaving looks clean. No more pressure. No more noise. No more proving anything to people who already decided what they think of you. I thought about it. More than once. Not in a loud way. In a quiet, practical way. What would my life look like if I chose comfort over commitment? If I stopped demanding so much from myself? If I let the standard drop just enough to be accepted? Those thoughts don't make you weak. They make you human. But every time they showed up, something else showed up too. A question I couldn't avoid. If I walk away now, who do I become? Not to the world, to myself. I realized staying wasn't about winning. It wasn't about legacy. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about identity. I didn't stay because it was hard. I stayed because leaving would have cost me something heavier. Self-respect. So I kept showing up, even when my body resisted, even when belief around me faded. Not louder, not faster, just present. Because sometimes the strongest decision you make is refusing to disappear when no one would blame you for it. And somewhere along the way, there was you. Not cheering, not demanding explanations, not asking for more, just here. Still listening when the story stopped being exciting, when there were no highlights left to replay, when all that remained was effort without applause. You didn't have to stay. There was nothing flashy waiting for you. No guarantees, no payoff promised. And that's why it matters. Because presence like that is rare. Most people show up when the outcome feels safe, when success looks inevitable. Very few stay when the process is quiet, uncertain, and heavy. You don't know what it costs to keep going like that until you've done it alone. Until nights stretch longer than they should. Until motivation disappears and discipline is the only thing left. And yet, you stayed. Not to fix anything. Not to save me. Just to witness. That does more than you realize. Because when you've spent years being evaluated, judged, reduced, being listened to without interruption feels almost unreal. It reminds you that connection doesn't have to be loud to be real. That someone choosing to stay is sometimes enough to keep you standing, even with discipline, even with consistency, even with someone listening. The questions don't disappear. They wait. They show up in the spaces where noise can't reach. You start asking yourself things that don't have clean answers. Was the sacrifice worth it? Did I confuse commitment with suffering? Did I demand excellence? Or did I hide behind it? Those questions don't accuse you. They just sit there. And the longer you carry responsibility, the heavier they feel. People think doubt means weakness. It doesn't. Doubt means you're paying attention. It means you understand that choices have consequences that echo far beyond you. Some nights, progress didn't feel like movement. It felt like standing still while the world passed judgment. Headlines spoke louder than effort. Opinions traveled faster than context. And silence, my silence, was interpreted as immunity, as if not reacting meant not feeling. But pain doesn't need an audience to accumulate. It settles in your chest. It follows you into moments that should feel victorious and whispers, "You're still carrying this alone." I thought time would solve it. That moving forward would leave the ache behind. It didn't. It just waited until I slowed down enough to notice. And in those moments, the hardest thing wasn't continuing. It was accepting that some answers never arrive. Somewhere between exhaustion and clarity, something softer appeared. Not certainty, not victory, hope. Not the loud kind that celebrates outcomes. The quiet kind that sits with you when there's nothing left to prove. Hope didn't come from winning. It didn't come from being understood by everyone. It came from moments like this. From knowing that someone chose to listen without turning it into an opinion. Without demanding a summary. Without asking me to be anything other than honest. That matters. Because the world doesn't reward patience anymore. It rewards reaction. Speed. Extremes. Reflection doesn't trend. Silence isn't impressive. And yet, this is where meaning lives. If you're still here, still listening, then maybe you know this feeling too. The tiredness that doesn't come from effort, but from carrying expectations alone. The quiet frustration of being reduced to outcomes while the cost stays invisible. If that's you, then this isn't just my story. It's ours in different forms, different lives, the same weight. You don't need to rush healing. You don't need to explain your exhaustion. You don't need to justify why you stayed when leaving would have been easier. Staying doesn't make you stubborn. It makes you committed to something you couldn't abandon without abandoning yourself. So let this end without a lesson, without a conclusion. Just the understanding that effort matters even when it's unseen, and that choosing to show up in the quiet hours, when no one is watching, is already enough. After the lights go out, after the work is done, after the body finally slows, that's when the truth lingers. Not the truth people applaud, the one that stays with you when there's no schedule to follow and no standard left to chase. You realize something then. That discipline didn't just shape your days, it shaped how you relate to the world. You became careful with words, selective with trust, comfortable with distance. Not because you wanted walls, but because walls formed quietly around what mattered. There are people who remember you only for what you produced, and others who remember you for how hard you were to be around. Both miss the point. Because what you were really doing was protecting a standard you couldn't explain without it sounding excessive, and maybe that's okay. Not everything meaningful needs to be understood immediately. Some things only make sense to the person who carried them. I don't regret the hours. I don't regret the isolation. I don't regret choosing the quiet over comfort. But I do recognize the cost, the missed moments, the misunderstandings that never healed, the versions of myself that only existed alone in empty gyms and early mornings. Those versions mattered too. They built something that can't be measured, something that doesn't disappear when the noise fades. So if this is where you are now, past the excitement, past the validation, past the need to be seen, then you're not behind. You're just in the part most people never reach. The part where the work is done not for applause, but for alignment. And if you return to the quiet tonight, if you move when the world rests, if you choose effort without witnesses, you won't be alone. Someone else is doing the same thing, somewhere, in silence.